In the first video on game dynamics, I showed you how to create conditions to control the door mechanics so that a player has to pick up 4 power-up objects that are sitting around the environment in order to trigger the door to open. In this video, I want to show you a mini game to get one of those power-up objects. So in this case, let's take a look at the mini game first. So I'll go ahead and play. And we'll walk over, and that's one power object that we just picked up. The mini game is down in the water area, and you can see the power-up object that I want to get on the other side. And if I go down to this platform, you'll see that it's telling me that I need to throw an axe. And if I were to get off of this and try to actually get that power-up object, it's too far away for me to get. It's up further than I could jump. And if I try to jump at it and hit the water, I'll actually die because of the sharks that are swimming around in there. So we need to throw axes at these targets, and you can see they have a light on them that when I hit the bulb nose of the clown face, it'll actually turn the light out, smash the bulb, there's a little explosion, and the power-up object animates down so that we can actually go and pick it up. So that's the main actions for this particular mini game. In that case, I've won the mini game. Now, if I fall in the water, there is a hazard here with the water. If I jump into it, you'll see that I die. And that is spawning a camera that has some rigid body on it, and it also puts up a dead screen and restarts the game to the beginning here, or restarts the level. So that's the mini game that we want to look at today in this video, and I'm going to show you all the scripts that are working with that mini game. There's quite a few things. We'll start with the platform that's moving. So if I close up my outpost here, because we're not going to be looking at that today, we're instead going to be looking at the mini game, and I've organized it under a single empty here. And I want to go in and look at the parts of this mini game, starting with the platform. So here's the platform right here. And the platform, if I open it up, you'll see that there is there's a platform object. And let's just zoom in on it by double clicking it. So here's our platform object. And we can see when I select it that there is a green collider sticking out of the top of this platform object. So that's actually the trigger that is making the platform work as a moving platform to keep the player on it. Now in Unity, when you have a FPS controller like we have, it won't stay on a moving platform. If you just try to jump on a moving platform, it'll fall off of it. And so the way you make it stay is you parent the FPS controller underneath the platform that's animating to move. You can jump on a platform that's not moving just fine, but if it's moving, it'll actually fall right off of it. So you can see that I've got a couple of pieces here. I've got the main platform that I've named platform. I've got a ride object, which is actually the one that has the trigger. You can see it's got a transform, and it really is just an empty that I parented underneath the main platform object. And that main platform object, I just created a 3D object cube to make that object. And I scaled it to the shape and size that I wanted for the platform. So it's just a simple cube, and I did put a shader or material on it. I created a material for it that is using one of the shaders or one of the textures that came in with the standard assets. So I just put the little stained glass texture on it so that it would look more interesting. You could put any kind of texture you want on it, or you could bring in a platform object from Maya that you texture map in there and bring the textures in as we have done before. But it's a simple object, and this object is the one that's animating. So you can see it's got a regular box collider on it, and that is actually scaled exactly the size of this platform. That's what keeps you from falling through the platform into the water. So it's important that you do have a regular box collider on there that's not set to trigger, and it should be the shape and size of your platform. And then I have an animation on this platform that is just making it move back and forth across the water. And I'll show you how I set that up in a minute, but that's using animation component with Legacy. You could use the animator with an animator controller, but since it's such a simple animation, it's sometimes easier, especially if you're just prototyping, to use the Legacy animation component. It does have a rigid body on it, just so that the physics engine inside of Unity can keep track of where it is, especially for collisions. When you have some kind of moving object that you're going to be jumping on, you want the physics engine, which is in charge of collisions, to always know where it is. And so you can put a rigid body on it under physics by add component physics and choosing rigid body. And when it comes up as your component, make sure that you turn is kinematic on and turn use gravity off. If it is a floating platform like this one, you don't want it to use gravity. And if it's animated, you want is kinematic, because is kinematic is for animated objects. That's going to tell the physics engine where that platform is, and sometimes you may want to change the collision detection down here. I've got it on the default discrete, but if I was having any problems with it, or if I didn't think it was working very well, I might try these other collision detection methods. Some of them are better, especially if you have fast moving objects. But this one seems to be working fine, so I just left it on the defaults. But that is why you want it, is because it's in charge of collisions. Now, I also have an audio source on this object, and you can see I've got a Coney Island audio clip plugged into it. And a lot of these audio clips that I'm using, I got from freesound.org. So you can go to that website or others that have sounds that are open source as long as you give credit to the people who made the sounds. And I'm using a lot of those in this prototyping level. So in this case, I am plugging in the sound because I just want it to play anytime this platform starts to move. And I do not have it playing on awake. I turn that off. And of course, if you're adding your sound sources, you're going to add those under components, audio, and an audio source. And in order to make this audio source play the sound, and it is looping, I have loop turned on, you want to go in and find that audio source in your script and play it. And so I'm actually doing that not on a script on this object. You can actually see that there are no scripts on this object. The script is actually on the ride object that's child of this platform. So let's go take a look at that. The child object, you're going to want to use something like an empty. So I just created an empty, and I parented it under the platform and reset its cog icon to reset the transforms, and it popped right on top of this object. Now you can see I've moved it up a little bit, and that was just to make sure that this trigger is sitting above the actual platform. You can also do that on the box collider itself by moving its center, and you're going to want to maybe size it a little bit up in Y. You can see I've got a 3 in Y here on the size of my box collider that is being set to a trigger, and that's just making it thicker than the actual platform. And then I moved it up a little bit in Y, and I also moved it up a little bit in the position. You can do it either way, just as long as it's sitting above, because that's where your FPS controller is going to jump onto it or step onto it. And as long as it's on there and intersecting with this, it's going to be parented to it. And once it's parented to it, it will go with the moving platform until you jump off of it. Now there's also a platform light that I've placed on here, and I've placed it slightly above this platform and made it a purplish color and brought the intensity up a little bit. And that light is off when you walk up to it, and it turns on when you step on the platform. And the music starts, so it feels like you're getting on a ride at some amusement park. So let's take a look at the actual script that is on this ride object. So we can see that it's called platform ride, and if we look at the fields that are coming up in the inspector, we have to have some public variables for inputting the platform that is the parent of this object. It also, I'm giving it a number, and that's actually if you have more than one platform and you want to use the same script on it, then you can tell it what the number of the platform is. And that's for the animation. And then there's a platform light that I have that I'm plugging in, so that's going to be a light variable. And then there's text hints, because when you step on the platform, it tells you that you can throw the axes at the targets. And you might want some other thing. You might want a visual reference of an axe on your HUD to give you that feedback instead of text, or along with the text. It's up to you. But you can only throw the axes when you're stepping on the platform. You can't throw axes from other places. So if we go look at that script, I'm going to go into Visual Studio and we'll take a look at this script. So this script, it has the usual system collections at the top. I have added the using Unity Engine UI because we are using the text. So if you're using text, which is part of the UI, you have to have that line at the top. This one's called Platform Ride, and the script goes on the child empty that has a box trigger. And then the variables for this script, here's the public variables we were just looking at that you plug in. First, there's a private variable called transform the player. This is actually, instead of pulling the player in a public variable, we're actually going to do a GameObject.find in the start to find the FPS controller. As long as we know what the name of that controller is, we can do it that way. And it is using a transform variable. So that means that the reason we need that is because we're going to try to parent that. And you're parenting, when you parent something, you're parenting the transforms. So it needs to be a transform variable. And then I have a public game object, the platform. And this is the platform parent object that is animated. And then we have a public int anim number. And this is actually if you're using multiple platforms and you have different animations that you want to go on them, then this can tell you a number. If you name them all the same, say you name them move platform, which is what I named my animation, if you can then make a move platform 1, move platform 2 for the name of your animations. And the number that you put in when you assign the script in the inspector will tell it which animation to go retrieve and play. So on the next line, animation platform move, that is actually a private variable. It's a container for the animation that is the animation component on this, the platform object, so the parent object. Public light, platform light, that's a light variable that we plug in the light for the platform so we can control it to turn it on and off. And then we've got public text, text hints, and that's the text object that's going to give us a hint across the bottom of the screen when we first step on the platform. So in Start, you can see I'm setting up a lot of these variables. First, I'm finding the FPS controller's transform and putting it into the player variable. Then I am going on the next line using a transform.parent.getComponent animation. So the animation is on the parent. So if we go back into Unity, this script is on the ride object, and the platform object is the parent of that. So that ride object is going to move with it, but that's not where the animation is. The animation is on the platform object that is the parent. That's where the animation component is that has move platform 1 animation plugged into it. So if you want to play that animation, you have to find it in the hierarchy, and it's one level up. And that's why this line here says transform.parent.getComponent animation. So that's going one up in the transforms to the parent platform object and finding the animation component there. If there were two of them, you could repeat that. You could go transform.parent.transform.parent and go 2 levels up. But this is just going 1 level up to the platform object. And it's finding that animation component and put it in a platform move variable. It's then on the next line going in and taking that platform move, and it's specifying the name of the animation in a string, which has double quotes around it, and I'm adding the anim number that I had at the top. So by default, that's 1. So that's going to put a 1 where anim number is, and so it's going to say move platform 1. That's actually the name of the animation here. So if you want to play that particular animation, you need to specify the name exactly as it's written. It is case sensitive. And so it's looking at that animation, and there's a dot syntax on that animation class called .time, and it's making that equal to 0.0 float. So that's the F is a float, and that is telling it that you're going to start the animation at 0. .time is where the animation starts. And that's kind of one of the more advanced properties on animation control that you can access through the class. And sometimes, like in my floating platforms, I actually use that to offset the animations so that they're all using the same animation on the moving platforms, but they're starting at different times. So this one's just starting at a default 0. And then platform light.intensity, I'm setting to 0 in this line because I want the light to be off. And intensity can turn it off by putting the intensity to 0. And you can turn it on by bringing that up to whatever number you want the intensity to be on that light. My light, its intensity when it's fully on is 2. So I'm putting it down to 0, so it effectively turns it off. It's a different way of turning it off. I'm not using a dot enabled flag or anything like that. Instead, I'm using the intensity and just turning it down to 0. So if we go down to what's happening when you actually step on the platform, that is going to be in the void on trigger enter procedure and on trigger exit procedure. We have one of each of those here. And it's important to have that in this case because you're stepping on the platform. You're going to intersect with the platform's trigger, and when you step off of it, you're going to exit that trigger. So because you're actually being made child to it, you can move independently of the parent, but you are going to move with the parent. So you're going to move with the moving platform, but you can walk on the moving platform. And you can jump off the moving platform. And when you jump off, you're going to go out, exit that green trigger, and you're going to trigger the on trigger exit procedure. So when you walk on it, you trigger the on trigger enter procedure, and whatever it collides with goes into the procedure into the arguments here that says collider COL. And then it checks if that thing that collided with that trigger is tagged player. And we've used this in other scripts, and we'll continue to use this because a lot of things have to do with the player triggering it. And so we're looking for that, and if that's true, then it's going to turn on a can throw axe global variable. So this is a global variable. It's actually in the axe thrower script. We've used global variables before for the charge variable for the power-ups. And in this case, there's an axe thrower, or there's a can throw axe variable inside of the axe thrower script that we're accessing here, and we're saying assigning it true, turning it on. And in that case, we can actually throw axes at that point as soon as we step on there. And then the platform light dot intensity we're setting to 2, so the light comes on for the platform. And then we're taking the player, and here's where we're actually parenting the player so that we'll move with the platform. The player dot transform dot parent, so that's the platform itself, is going to equal to the platform dot transform. So the player dot transform dot parent is the FPS controller. So that's what we found up here in the first line of the start. We're taking the FPS controller, we're finding its transforms, and putting it into the player variable. And in that case, or in this line, it's taking that and parenting it to the platform's transforms. And that will make it move with the platform. And then we've got a debug line here. This is a debug.log line that prints whatever's in the double quotes. That string is going to print that to the command line. So if it makes it to this point in the script, it's going to show up in your lower left of your Unity screen, and you'll be able to see that it has been parented. Sometimes you put these debug lines in places when you're testing it out, and you might comment them out later, or you could just leave them there. It depends on how many they are, if they're distracting. But in this case, it's still there. So I can see when it gets parented, and then the next lines are actually to do the animation. So this platform move, which is specifying move platform plus the animation number, so that's move platform 1. It's finding that animation, it's taking the dot enabled for that animation and setting it to true. That means it's going to turn the animation on, and the next line where it sets the wait to 1 is going to play the animation forward in normal time. So that's activating the animation and playing it. And then, and this is a little different than the way I've done it in other places where we were maybe triggering the animation for the door, for instance. We didn't use these types of lines for the animation. So this is an alternative, a little bit more advanced way of triggering animation to play, because you have more control over it. The ones we did for the door animation, it was a single line, and all you could do was turn it on and it would play. In this case, I'm actually have a little bit more control. I didn't really need to use that here. I could have just used the other one, but I did want to start introducing you to these ones that have a little bit more control over the animation and how you play it. And then we've got a transform.parent get component audio source play. So we've seen several ways of doing audio in the scripts. I'm not actually bringing any audio in at the top and in the variables, and I'm not getting any audio component in the start. But what I am doing here is I'm getting the component of the audio source, and we saw that there was an audio source on this object, and it's actually it's not on this object that has the script, it's on the parent object. It has an audio source, the platform itself, and it has plugged into it the Coney Island track. And that Coney Island track will then play when this audio source is told to play. And again, it's using the transform.parent so that it goes up to that parent object. And then the text hints line we've seen before. We saw it in the trigger zone script, and it is doing a send message to show hint and telling us that we can throw axes. So all of that's happening when you step on the platform. And then when you step off the platform, it's again checking to see if what is exiting is the player, and if that's true, it's going to run the axe thrower.canThrow axe global variable line again and set it to false. So now we can't throw axes as soon as we step off of it. We've got a platform light intensity setting back down to 0, so it turns the light off again. And then the player.transform.parent is being set to null. So this is where it actually unparents the player from the platform so that it won't move with it anymore. It sets the parent to null. That means it's the player is just parented to the world axis and not to any other object at that point. And then we've got another debug line telling me that it's not parented anymore, and the platform move or move platform 1 animation dot enables it is being set to false, so the animation will stop. And then the transform.parent get component audio source is also stopping the audio. So all of that is being done when you step off the platform. And if we go look at that again, let's just try it again. I'm going to run over and step on the platform. So if I walk on the platform, we can see there's no light on right now. And when I walk on the platform, we see the light comes on, I get the text, it goes away after 5 or 6 seconds because that's how we have it set up on the text hints object. And then I can start throwing my axes. So you can't throw axes if I step off of this platform. I'll step off of the platform over here, and you see that the light goes out, the music stops playing, and if I try to throw an axe, I'm clicking to throw an axe, it won't shoot an axe anymore. So that's how that script is working, and you can make a moving platform for anything. It doesn't have to just be going side to side like this one. It could be going up and down like an elevator. There's a lot of things you could do with it. And this particular animation, I do want to look at that. If I look at the animation that's on it, that was made by just selecting the object, the platform object, and going to Window, and I'm going to go to Animation, and setting the keyframes for it. You can see I've got several keyframes over 20 seconds to make it go over the water. So if I slide this, you'll see that it moves it. And those keyframes are easy to set. You can also look at the curves for that. This one is mainly just moving, I believe, in X. Let me just hit F to frame it, and you can see that that's actually what the animation looks like. And it does loop, so if I zoom out, you can see that it's looping there. But it starts here, it goes across, and then it goes back again, and then it just loops after that. So it'll keep looping if you continue to stand on the platform. But those keyframes are easy to make. If I wanted to animate something like that inside of Unity, let's say I create another platform here. So I just create a 3D object cube, and I'll move it a little bit over here, and let's just try to scale it a little bit so that it's the shape of a platform, not too thick, and has a little width to it. And I could put a material on it, but I'm not going to bother to do that right now. So if I create that platform and say put it right here, and I want to animate it across the water, then what I can do, I would want to zoom out on it so I could see the length of what I wanted to animate, and I would go at this point, this cube object, we could call it platform 2. It doesn't have any rigid body on it, so if I was animating this, I would want a box collider to keep you from falling through it, and I'd want to go ahead and create the other stuff like the empty that I would child under it, and the light. Probably put all that on there before you actually animate it. But to do the animation part, all I have to do is go up to Window with it selected, and I'll go to Animation, Animation. And that is going to give me the animation editor, and I can go in and hit Create, and you can put your animation wherever you want. I put a lot of mine just inside of Assets, but if you have a lot of animations, you might want to create an animations folder to put them in so you can easily find them. But I'm going to just add another one here. Let's just call this, I'll give it a different name here. Or actually, let's give it we'll do the same name. Move platform, only we'll put 3. Because I have a 1 and 2 on there already, created already. So I'll hit Move Platform 3. I hit Save on that. And I need to add a property to animate, and I'm going to choose Transforms. And in this case, all I really want to do is move the position back and forth over the water. So I'm going to find the little plus sign next to position and click on that. And that adds that in over here on the left, and it adds a couple of empty keyframes on the right inside of the area that is actually your animation area, your dope sheet. So you're in the dope sheet. You can see it on the bottom of the editor. We can make this a little smaller, so we can put it down at the bottom here and still see our animation in the 3D view. And then you decide how long you want your animation to be. Now, if I'm going from one side to the other, that's a pretty long space. If I want a really fast platform, maybe it'll go in 5 seconds, which is pretty fast. And, for my mini game, I had to think about that. When I first did it, it was actually too fast because it's harder to throw hatchets and hit those moving targets if your platform's moving really fast. So I slowed it down to make it a little easier. I think my entire animation was 20 seconds total from one side back to where you started. So it would have been 10 seconds instead of 5, but let's do 5 to get across. And so if I go back to the beginning part here, and I'll click on those, that's where my actual placement in this timeline is. And I want to turn on this red button on the left here that will do auto recording. And then I'll just move this platform a little bit. You can just move it and move it back to where it was, and that will activate the keyframe to be set. So now it's recorded a keyframe on that 0 key. And then if I use my controls over here, there's one with an arrow and a line. I'll click on that to go to the one that I put on 5. And I'll move the platform all the way across to the other side, right before that little island there. And so if I scrub the timeline by clicking in the numbers above the keyframes and click and drag with the left mouse button, I can see how that platform is animating across that space. And it looks fine. And if I want it to loop, if I wanted to go back to where it was, say for frame 10, what I could do is click my little arrow with the line again to go back to frame 1. I can activate that keyframe, and you can actually do Control-C on your keyboard to copy it. So I just hit Control-C. And if I go to frame 10 and hit Control-V, it will paste that first keyframe on, it's actually not frame 10, it's 10 seconds. So I'm at 10 seconds on the timeline, and I just pasted the keyframe from 0. And that will give me a complete loop there from one side and to back again. And then if I loop that animation, then it will just continue going back and forth from one side to the other. Now, if I go look at the curves down to the bottom, what I'm seeing here is the Z curve that's completely flat because I didn't animate it in the blue axis and the Z axis at all. I just animated it in the X axis. So I need to open that up and select the X axis and hit F in the view to see that. And I can see that that is my animation that I just did. And I have curves that has handles at each of the keyframes. And you could adjust those handles. Right now, I've got, for these handles, they're flat. All of the handles are flat, which means that when you have a flat handle, that's no movement. The vertical space in the animation editor here in curves, the vertical space is movement. The horizontal space is your keyframes, is time. And so if it's flat in vertical space, that means no movement. So if this curve had no height, like the one for the Z-axis that we looked at, that has no height at all. So that means there's no movement there, and the handles are flat also there. But the X one actually does have movement between the keyframes because there is a vertical line there. But when it gets to the keyframes, the handles are flat, which means that it's doing an ease in and an ease out. And an ease out, say on this first keyframe, is when it starts with no movement and then the movement increases. And then it's doing an ease out when it gets to the height of that movement, which is going to be the other side of the water, and it's slowing down as it reaches that. And then it's starting slow again and speeding up, and on the other side it's slowing down as it reaches back to the original place again. So each time you see a flat curve, it's going to be doing that ease in and ease out. And that's pretty good because it makes it feel like you're slowing down the momentum or gaining momentum. For something that should look like it has physics affecting it, it actually is how things work. When you start your car, it doesn't start up in its fastest speed. It starts slow and speeds up. And so the same thing you would want for something like this. If I went in here, if I right-click these, I could set them to something like linear, which would make a constant speed. It wouldn't slow down, and that could be okay for certain animations that you want to be constant. And there are a lot of other choices in here for different things, for making them go in different directions and things like that. You can go in and you can select the handles and move them around, and that will change the way the animation goes. In this case, it would actually speed up coming out of that second keyframe. So if I played this, you'd see it start really slow, and it would actually speed through and actually go too far on that other side. It actually went into the rocks and intersected with the rocks. Because it's not only speed here, but it's also distance in that axis that it's moving. And so it's moving beyond if this placement of the keyframe was exactly where that was supposed to stop before it hit the rock, that curve was going beyond that when I pushed it up. So we would want to put this back to flat again. And if we did set this tangent to say linear, or in this case, I just made them all linear, and the animation is going to be, whoops, hit the wrong play button. The animation is going to be at a constant rate. It almost looks like a Pong type of movement, where it rebounds from the keyframes in a very quick way. So that looks actually, it doesn't look like it has the correct physics. I'm going to undo that, Control Z, of something that's, say, a real platform or something that is heavy where gravity would be pushing on it. Okay, so that's the animation that you can create, and you can edit it in here with your curves. And once you have that animation, it's not going to be on your object by default. So if I look at this new platform's components, you will find an animator component there, and there is no animation plugged in because you would have to create an animator controller and plug the animation in to that inside of the animator controller. If you are doing a simple animation like this, and especially if you're doing a prototype and you want to do it quickly and not have to deal with creating nodes inside of the animator controller, it's easier to just use the legacy animation. And to do that, you would not want this animator component here because it would conflict with that. So you'd click on the cog icon and remove that animator component. And then you would need to go and add a component under miscellaneous, which is animation. You'd add an animation component. And that will allow you to plug a clip in that's set to legacy. So in order to do that, you have to go find your animation wherever you saved it. And in my case, I put it in Assets, and I called it Move Platform 3. And what I'm looking for are the ones that have a circle play button on them. And here it is. This is Move Platform 3. And it's not set to legacy by default. And I know that because of the way the components look on here. So there should be only one component if it's legacy, and it's to loop it or set other kinds of loop settings. And to do that, you're going to need to go up to beside where there's a little lock icon in the upper right corner. You're going to want to click on the pancake symbol with the drop down arrow. Don't click on the lock icon, and choose Debug with this animation selected. And there's a legacy button that you can turn on. And once you turn your legacy button on, you want to turn your debug mode back off again, because it does slow down the system to have debug on, because it's running a lot more background processes. So turn it back to normal, and then you'll see just one component, and it's a wrap mode. And that's where you're going to set your loop if you want it to loop. Or if you want it to play once, you can set to play once. Ping pong makes it go back and forth in the animation curve. I'm going to use loop. And then I need to just plug it in. So if I go back to this new platform object, find the animation component, and drag in your Platform 3 animation. And now it's there. And if you want to test it before you make the script play it, you just leave play automatically turned on and hit play. And what I should see is if I run over there, I will see that platform moving across the water. And you can see it's moving quite fast. Now, if I try to get on that platform, I'm not going to be able to get on it. I'll just fall right off of it. I'll try this next time it comes back to jump on it. And you see it kind of left me behind. So it won't work to try and walk on that platform. It'll just slide right out from under you unless you do the script setup that I talked about with the other platform. And that is a simple matter of just giving this platform an empty that has the platform ride script assigned to it. So that's how you're going to do your moving platform. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. And the next thing in this this mini game is to create the hatchet throwing effect. And we've done actually shooting effects before, and it's exactly the same. But what I have is on my FPS controller, there is child to the main FPS controller. There is the first person character object, and that has your camera. And that's what you want some kind of shooting effect to be on, because that means you can shoot wherever you're looking. And I have a launcher child to that. So it's the launcher object that is doing the hatchet throwing and or the axe throwing, and you can see it's an axe thrower script that's doing that. I actually have more than one. I've got a coconut thrower script on here for another previous mini game that we looked at it as part of the sort of default tutorial we did in class. But this axe thrower script works similarly, but it has extra stuff on it. So in order to make it so that we can throw axes without having to run down there all the time, let's go ahead and look at just the axe throwing by turning it on so that we can actually play it without running down there. So I'm going to go into the scripts, and I'm going to go into the axe thrower script that I have on. And this script is what's allowing me to throw axes, and there is a variable here that we've already seen called canThrowAxe. And it's a public static variable, so it's a global variable. And we were referencing it from the platform ride script. So over on the platform ride script, we were bringing in that variable in order to throw axes, to set axe thrower.canThrowAxe to true and false in the start area here, and in the actual walking on the platform. So I'm not actually setting it to false in this script. It's set to false by default, but I'm turning it on to true when we walk onto the platform and trigger this on trigger enter procedure. So if I go back to the axe thrower script, if I want to throw an axe to test it at the beginning, I could, instead of setting the default to false, I could set the default to true here. And that way the axe will actually be working from the very beginning when I start the game. And I can throw a few axes. So this is very similar to the shooter script I've shown before in previous videos, where you are going to have some public variables for inputting the sound that you want to happen when you shoot. In this case, it's a throw sound. And the prefab you want to instantiate in order to shoot it. In this case, it's an axe prefab that I made inside of Unity. And then a speed or a force that you want to place on the shooter mechanics in order to have it project the projectile out towards your target. There's nothing in the start here, and when we get to the update, which is always looping, we know that update is always running with the game loop, that it's going to look for the player to actually press the left mouse button. So this input get button up fire 1 is player presses left mouse. Or control, the left control button is also set to that by default. and can throw an axe. So that's being set by the global variable, and by default usually that's false unless you're on the platform, but we've set it to true temporarily to test this out. If that's true, if both of these things are true, if you're using a double and like this, that means both conditions have to be true in order for this if statement to be true, evaluated as true. And in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to instantiate the axe prefab at the position of the object this script is on. And this script is actually put on this launcher object. So that's where the script is. So wherever you put the launcher object, in my case, if we zoom in on our FPS controller here, the launcher object is placed slightly to the right of the actual FPS controller and its collider. So you can see the green collider when I select the FPS controller. If I select the launcher object, it's an empty that I've created and made child. I named it launcher. Made it child to the first person character camera, and I placed it slightly outside of the collider that's on the FPS controller. You don't want it to be inside of the collider or too close to the collider, because when you instantiate the object that you're going to be launching, if it hits that collider, it's gonna rebound off of it and it won't go straight. So you want to make sure that it's outside of that. And it's the z-axis that we're shooting towards. So you want to sort of angle your empty for your launcher to be facing in the direction that you would be throwing. And you might want to rotate it a little bit in order to make it so that it's going to be throwing towards the center of the screen where you're looking at. And you can see I've got some rotations in my transforms, not very much, just a small amount, in order to make that throw go where I'm looking. And so that's what's happening in the script when it instantiates, when it does this instantiate line. It's going to instantiate a rigid body object, which is the axe prefab. And so the axe prefab has to have a rigid body on it. It's got to have gravity and all of that stuff. And when it instantiates it where that launcher is in position and rotation, transform.position, transform.rotation means is referencing the transforms of the object that this script is on. If I wanted it to instantiate somewhere else, I could actually put the name of an object or a some other object dot transform dot position in there, and it would actually instantiate it where that object is. But I want it to just be where my launcher is, so you leave everything off but transform dot position and rotation, and it's instantiating that as a rigid body, and it's catching it in this rigid body new axe variable. So it's declaring the variable, it's instantiating, catching the object reference for that new axe into that variable so that we can give it a name, and we can use the dot velocity and dot name dot syntax to name it and project it forward. So dot velocity is actually a built-in component there for the rigid body class, and it's going to look for a number to put a force on that in a certain direction. And the direction we're doing is forward, transform dot forward, multiplied by the throw speed, and that's going to send the axe forward, or any projectile that you want to shoot out. And then the audio source dot clip play clip at point is actually playing the audio. It's doing an audio source, or referencing the audio source that this object is on. You can see I do have an audio source on this object, this launcher object, because I am referencing it right there in the script. And it's doing a play clip at point where of the throw sound where this object is in position. So it's playing that sound right where the launcher object is. So if it's a throw sound like a whoosh, then that's coming from the right of your or the right of my FPS controller, because that's where the launcher object is, like you're throwing with your right arm. Okay, so that is the throwing a hatchet or an axe. And if I play it, we turned it on so that we could throw it. I should be able to throw it right now. Let me get, oh, I didn't save the script. Okay. So we changed it, made it true. Let's do a file save on that so that we can go and test it out and throw an axe. So I'm throwing an axe. And I can throw a bunch of them. And what you see is happening with that axe is that when it's launching from the right of my FPS controller, right to the right of my camera, and you hear the sound, and it also is coming from the right, and you also hear the axe hit, and you see it spin forward until it hits the wall, and then it falls down and just lays flat until it disappears. So it's actually disappearing after about 5 or 6 seconds. So you want that. You don't want your, if you're throwing a bunch of these, you don't want them building up and the physics engine having to keep track of them forever in your game, so they disappear. And that is a destroy command that's on the axe itself. And all the other stuff that we're seeing, the rotation of the axe and the sound when it hits, that is happening on the other scripts. So the launcher object has this axe thrower script on it, and you can see that I've got a throw sound plugged in, and it's got a coconut throw sound that we used from our previous class assets. And then I've got an axe prefab plugged in that is a rigid body object. And then the throw speed, which I could adjust depending on how much force I want that axe to be thrown at. That's all going into the script and affecting the throwing of that axe. But the actual prefab that I have plugged in here is in my prefabs folder. So I created an axe that inside of Unity, it's really just a cylinder and I created a couple 3D objects, cylinder, and I also created a sphere. I believe it's a sphere, or no, sorry, it's a capsule. I created a capsule object and a cylinder and just intersected them and parented them to each other. If we go look at that, here's the actual axe object, and I could have made a nicer axe inside of Maya and imported it in, and it would work the same, but I made this one just for a prototype for testing and then ended up keeping it. So this object, if we open it up in our prefabs, you can see this object has the axe prefab is the top level, and that's the cylinder. It's just a cylinder mesh, as you can see inside of the inspector here. It is tagged axe. That's important. I made a new tag. I added a new tag. You go to add tag and hit the plus symbol and then type in axe, or I have got several custom tags here, brick, axe, shark. Type in your tag name and hit enter, and then you go back and you can then set your tag and choose it in here. So I've chosen the axe tag for this, and that's going to be important for recognizing when that axe hits the target. And then I've also got the capsule collider on it, and that's just a regular collider. There's no trigger there, so that when it hits something, when the blade of that, or in the case of this one, this isn't the blade, this is the handle. When the axe handle hits something, it will recognize that as colliding. And then I've got a rigid body on it. So this is what needs to be on it in order to plug it into that shooter script, into the axe thrower script, to be able to project it out. It requires a rigid body. And these are just the default settings. I didn't change anything on those. Use gravity is turned on. What's making the axe spin is this axe spin script. You also notice that there's a sound source on here, so I am using sound with this as well. The axe blade itself is similar. It's a capsule with a capsule collider, but there's not really any scripts or anything on that, and it doesn't even have rigid body on it. It just has the collider. So it's child to the handle, so it's going to fly through the air with the handle, and it's the handle which has the rigid body and gravity. So if we go look at the script, we can see that the script only has one public variable. It's for the hit sound. Let's go look at that. It's the axe spin script, and this script is what's making the axe turn when you throw it, and it's also what's stopping the axe from turning when it collides with something. So if we look at this, there are some Boolean. There's a Boolean variable called in air. So I need to keep track of whether this axe is in the air or not. And when it hits something, it's not going to be in the air anymore. It's either going to be stuck in something or it's going to fall to the ground. So by default, this axe is going to be in the air as soon as you instantiate it from the FPS controller launcher object. So that in-air variable is going to be set to true down here in the start by default. And then I've also got the public audio clip axe hit sound, which we saw inside of the inspector. That has the sound that the axe makes when it strikes something. The throwing sound is being done by the axe thrower script. The hitting sound is being done by this script. There's another Boolean called has hit. This is just keeping the axe from having multiple sounds played for hitting. I tried it without it, and the hitting sound of the axe would happen when it hits a target, but if it falls to the ground, it would happen again. and then if it rolled or hit a couple of things, every time it hit something, it would make a sound. And it seemed like too much. So I created this has hit variable to control the hit sound to only occur when it hits the main target. It's not going to make a sound when it falls to the ground. And then and it would even make a sound if it hit a water collider or some other collider, and I didn't want that. So then we have an audio source, audio player source, and that's to get the source on this object to play it. We've seen several ways of doing it. This is just creating a variable for the source in the top here where the variables are, and then getting the component for that audio source and storing it in that variable in the start. And that means we're going to play it somewhere down here in the script. The has hit variable is false by default, so when you instantiate an axe to throw it, it hasn't hit anything yet. The update is checking to see if the axe is in the air. And if it is in the air, if in air is true, and it is true as soon as the axe is instantiated and thrown, then it's going to rotate the axe forward towards the target. So it's running a transform rotate dot syntax for the transform class, and it's taking that axe handle and it's rotating it in the x-axis. So this new vector 3 is going to have 3 fields separated by commas. The first one is going to be x, second one y, third one z. You can see there's 0, and it's multiplying a number by time.delta time to continuously pump numbers in there. So it's going to keep rotating as long as in air is true. And then when this on collision enter happens, that's going to happen whenever the collider hits anything at all. And in air is going to be set to false. So the next time update loops, once it's hit something, it's going to not be true anymore, and it's going to stop rotating. And at that point, the gravity will kick in and it will fall to the ground. The rigid body will just make it fall to the ground. The if line here inside of the on collision enter is to play the sound of hitting something and also destroy the axe after 5 seconds. So you can see it's got the audio player source play 1 shot, so it's playing a hit once. And then it's saying has hit true. So that's part of this if statement. It's looking, it's only going to play the sound and destroy the axe if it hasn't hit anything yet. So not has hit. You should understand the not syntax of using an exclamation point in front of has hit. That means that it's evaluating that as not has hit is true, and the game object itself that this script is on is not equal to null. So this not equals is also checking to make sure that the axe hasn't been destroyed yet. So there's a couple of checks there. One is it hasn't hit anything yet, and another thing, the other condition is that it still exists. And then if that's true and it hits something, it's going to play the sound and it's going to destroy the object after 5 seconds. So that's how the axe spin script is working. And the last script is hitting the target. So I'm going to go back to the axe thrower script and set it back to false by default so that we can only throw axes when we're at the target. And then I'm going to go in and let's go back to the game. We'll go out of the prefab here by clicking our arrows. And I want to go down and look at these targets now. So the target that I'm throwing these axes at, I've got several of these targets in here. I've made them into a prefab also so that I could duplicate them. So you can see it's a prefab. We can look at that prefab directly. This is what the target looks like. And this was actually made inside, most of these things were made inside of Maya. I put them together inside of Unity, but the pieces were all made inside of Maya. So we've actually, the logs here were made for a different purpose, to create some logs for a signal fire, and I just reused them here. There's several of them, several tree logs in here that have been duplicated. And it's basically just a cylinder that I've run a little bit of a random command on inside of Maya to make it not too clean looking, and put a log texture on there. And a normal map. So those are the base of this target, and below that is a couple of barrels that are being used as sort of floating devices for the water. They're really just animated, but you know, there's an animation on this whole thing. And then we've got the board itself that has the it's really just a rectangle, a cube that's been scaled to a board size with a texture map on it, and it does have a bulb, a 3D bulb child to it that sticks out of it, that is your target. And there is an axe stuck in the target that is being revealed when you hit the target. So the way it works is that you're throwing an axe at the target. If the axe hits the bulb, the collider will activate the hit, and it will unhide this stuck axe and destroy the one that hit the bulb that you threw. And in that case, it's going to look like the axe stuck in the target. And any other hit is just going to rebound off of this and fall to the ground from the colliders. So these objects, like I said, were all made inside of Maya. Here are a couple of those objects, and they're very simply made. They're just a cylinder that I carved out the top of inside of Maya for the barrel, and a board that we've seen how to do things like cubes and scale them to the size of a wall or a door, or in this case a board. That's simple to do. The bulb here, I just moved vertices on a sphere to make a bulb type of shape. Just scaled some of those vertices down. Now, I haven't shown a lot of modeling inside of Maya. If you want to learn more modeling, you should definitely look into some tutorials on that. If I'm modeling something like this, I'm usually going to use simple shapes like a cylinder, and then just try to carve out some parts that I might want in that, that cylinder, and let the rest be done through texture mapping. So if I turn off my texture maps here, you can see these are very simple objects that, that are mostly looking good through the texture mapping. And if we look at the, say, for instance, the UV mapping on this, you're going to go in there and need to set all of your UVs so that they're going to efficiently do your texture mapping. And I do all of that inside of Adobe Photoshop. So here I am creating the board inside of Photoshop through a Jasper Johns target and a free board texture from Wild Textures or some other free texture mapping place, and then an old vintage Coney Island Tilly clown image. So these are things that you would put together inside of Photoshop so that you can actually then place it onto your UV map that you export out of Maya through the UV snapshot, as I've done in previous videos. Now, if you are going to do this with, say, a barrel, and you want to carve a barrel out, I'll go ahead and let's hide this, do a Control H and hide that. And we'll put this barrel over to the side. If I was going to make something like this barrel in here, I would just create a cylinder like so. And when you create that, it's not going to have the UVs that you want. They might be close to what you want, but as you model it, those are going to change. So I'll just go back to the classic, and just to show you how you would start editing something like that. The first thing I'd probably do is try to get my proportions right. I could use scaling, or I could go to my attribute editor and go to the actual polycylinder node, which is the creation node for this cylinder, and it shows me, you know, how many subdivisions I have. I could add a few there, and then you can look at how many you have around. You notice that mine had some noticeable stair stepping because I actually dropped the numbers around because I didn't think I really needed to have an absolutely smooth barrel. It looks smooth with the texture map on it. It looks fine, but I reduced the subdivisions to like 12, so that you are going to see some stair stepping. If you turn off your texture mapping, you'll see it. But once you have the texture map in there and you put it inside of your game, unless you're walking really close to it, you're not going to notice it. And then if I'm going to carve out the top, or I might want to actually increase the height of this barrel a little bit, give it a little bit more barrel dimensions, add maybe a couple more edges around it and subdivisions, because sometimes if you want to smooth it, or it will actually round it too much if you don't have some subdivisions in there. And then at some point you're going to want to get rid of that by deleting history. So if I go up, there's a couple of places you can click on your toolbar here, your main toolbar across the top, and one of those is delete by type history. It looks like a little clock. I'm going to click on that, and you see that creation node goes away. We don't need it anymore, and it will actually make it easier to get to our texture map node by getting rid of some of the other nodes. And then we might, if we scaled it or something like that, we might also want to click this one that looks like a snowflake, which is freeze transformations, and that will set all of our transforms back to their defaults. We didn't really scale it, so that doesn't matter. Now, the rest of the work that I would do on this to carve out the top, of this barrel would be to go to component mode. So I would right click this and choose a component with my right mouse button held down, and I choose faces so that I can select this top area because I want to do something to it. So I would just go in and hold my tab key down, and you can just paint across the top of this by holding your left mouse button down and grab all those faces, because I want to carve out the top, and usually you would do that with the faces, not the edges or the vertices. Now, if I'm going to work with modeling, I'd almost always switch to modeling standard in the workspace in the upper right, because that's going to allow me to have my modeling toolkit, which will allow me to easily select the different components without having to right click. And also it's got different tools down here for doing like multi-cuts or extrusions, and I'm going to be extrusion modeling, so I would want to use this extrude a lot. So if I click there, it's going to switch the manipulator, and you can use that manipulator, or you can just go back to your regular manipulators. What I actually want is I want to hit the scale manipulator and scale from the center of this group of faces, because I just extruded, which duplicated the faces. And if I scale it, and I'm going to undo for a second here. Over in my toolkit, there's a soft selection area that's turned on because I was using it before. And if it's turned on, it will actually not work correctly when I try to scale these. What I should see is faces moving and scaling without moving the actual edge of this barrel. And it's moving the edge because it's actually using a soft selection to select all the way down to the middle of the barrel. That's a fall off selection that is used to make movements of vertices and faces and edges that will sort of have a fall off across the entire object. I don't want that, so I'm going to turn that off, and then I'm going to try scaling it again. And you can see it's scaling the faces, but it's not moving the edge points. So I can just sort of make the size that I think it should be for the edge of that barrel. And then I'm going to hit extrude again, and I'm going to switch to the move manipulator, and I'm going to grab the green one for Y and move it straight down to carve out the top of that barrel. And that gives me a nice edge that I'll see on the front of my float. And that'll actually be a 3D edge. And that's really all I need. The rest of it's going to be texture mapping. The only thing that I might want to do is I could extrude again, go to scale again, and scale in just a little bit to put another edge right on the other side of that. Again, those little extra edges that might be sort of close to another edge will create a sharper edge there if I decide to use my 1, 2, and 3 keys to smooth this. So I just hit the 2 and 3 keys on my keyboard to do a smoothing operation on it. And I can see that that edge on the inside of the barrel stays nice and kind of hard because I added that extra edge there. I could add another one next to it on the inside here, but you'll notice that this part out here becomes very soft. If it was a plastic barrel, that might be good, but if it's a metal barrel, I wouldn't want that. I would want to go in and maybe go to multi-cut, which allows you to make cuts across the surface, and hold the control key down so I can do a cut across the entire area and then add an edge close to this outside edge. And if I hit the 3 key again, you'll see that that actually sharpened up that edge a little bit. And I could continue to do things like that if I wanted to add another edge in here to sharpen up this inner top edge. I could do that by holding the control key down, going to right there and adding another edge. Maybe right in the middle there. And then hit the 3 key again. You'll see that it sharpens that up a little bit. So I didn't really do this on my barrel. I didn't add this many edges because I really didn't bother to smooth it. But you can see that as I do that, same thing with the bottom. You can see it's kind of rounding out when I smooth it. If I go with my multi-cut tool and add an edge right near the bottom there, and then hit the 3 key again, you'll see that that bottom is still smoothing, but not as smooth as before. It wasn't rounding as much. So that's kind of how you can sort of carve things out. I mean, you can switch back to faces and hit Q to quit the multi-cut tool. And you know, if I wanted something to come out of the edge of this barrel, I could click that and I could hit extrude again, hit W and pull it out and pull out a piece there. You know, if there was going to be maybe some kind of spout in the side of the barrel, I could keep extruding like that and scale it down and extrude again and keep sort of doing that to carve out like a hole in the barrel. And you know, I actually was my manipulator was not set to, it looks like it was not set to local on the actual manipulator, and so it was set to object, but it wasn't set to component, so it actually didn't move it straight in the direction out from the face. So that might be a problem. It's kind of weird looking. If I hit 3 here, you'll see that that actually rounds that whole thing out to be more like a sort of like a spout that you might connect something to. So there might be a cover there, maybe if you're going to pump something into the barrel from the side. But if I wanted it to be a little bit sharper, I could add more edges in there. Okay, so that's how you're going to make carve out something like a shape into a basic shape like a cylinder. And I'm just going to undo back out of that. And if I wanted to actually go and I'm going to go to object mode, right click and go to object mode. If I wanted to map something like this, then you're going to want to go into your UV, and you may not want to use the one that you have here because I've added a lot of details to this object and they're not actually showing up on my UV map because they're kind of underneath and sitting on top of a lot of these default UVs. And I would want it to be more like this. So I would want to be able to maximize the side of the barrel with a big square texture like I'm using at the top of this map, and then optimize the top and the bottom of the barrel, the circular shape of it. And even though I have something similar with the top and bottom here and the side, a lot of the extra pieces are not actually there. So if I was going to do this, I'd probably want to do some my own working with this to cut the actual pieces where I want them. So if I was doing that, I want to select everything here. Use your face selection all, and then I would want to go into the create area and try an automatic and see what that looks like. And this isn't great because it's separating a lot of the whole thing into a lot of pieces, especially these pieces here. And I probably want to sew those together. So that's more work than I need. I'd rather tell it exactly how to unwrap it, because every 3D texture has to unwrap to a 2D square texture that fits within this one-to-one texture space. You can't go outside of it. You have to put it in here. So what I'd probably do with it selected still is do a camera based to wipe out all of the UVs. When you do automatic, you'll see white lines on the object. Those are where the cuts are that it made. And when you do camera based, you'll see there's no cuts. It's actually just projecting from the camera view here, the perspective view. Most of the time you won't want to use that, but it does wipe out all the cuts so that I can start to make my own cuts. And so what I would do is come over here to the barrel and choose edge, and I would choose an edge going up the side of this barrel. Now I could double click and get a loop, but you may not want to do that because it might go all the way to the center of that pole on the top, which I wouldn't want. I want it to stop actually on the edge right here. So I might actually double click this one here to get a loop around that whole top. I would like to, if you double click an edge, it will try to get the entire edge loop, and it's getting the one all the way around the top because I can see it turning orange. And then I can go to my cut and sew, and I can cut. And if I unselect, you'll see there's this white line around there now. And that's separated that. So now that top is its own piece. And then I want down along the edge here. So I want this one right here. You might want to turn off your manipulator so it's not in the way. And then I'm just going to hold the shift key down, which adds to my selection. And I'm just going to select each one of these vertical lines. It doesn't matter which vertical lines you do. You just want to choose one. And I did put this extra edge down here, so there's a really small one that I'm going to want to try and zoom in for, and hold shift down and try to get that one too. And then I'm going to cut that and take a look at it. And then I want the one which is right here along the bottom. I'm going to double click that and get the entire loop around the bottom, and I'm going to cut that too. So I've cut around the entire bottom. I've cut up the side, and it's important that these cuts connect to each other. Otherwise, the whole thing might not separate. And I want to separate that top piece from the bottom piece. And sometimes I also, with a barrel, will actually cut the lip off from the inner part, just because sometimes it's hard. You have to actually scale those separately from each other. You can try it in different ways. Like if I just want this top part of the lip, I might try to go all the way around that by double clicking. Or I might try to go right where the bottom one is. So we could try that. Let's try it. Let's do a cut right there. And that'll give us this top part, and it'll put all of this rest of it in sort of the middle part, hopefully. So we'll try it. We'll go to the top again, hit the face all, so everything's selected. And then you want to open up where it says unfold, and you're going to you want to do a unfold, just a basic unfold. And that cuts the pieces out that I had. And you can see that they're there. They're kind of outside of the texture space, and they're overlapping each other. You're going to want to, with it still selected, go to Arrangement and Layout and do a layout. That will try to optimize them inside of the one-to-one texture space. And they're still not going to be quite right. You're going to want to right-click and choose UV Shell and pick the one that is for the side. You want that to be straight. You don't want that to be rotated. So I'm going to put my rotation tool on and kind of try to rotate it pretty close to straight. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. I'm going to try to get it pretty close. And then I'm going to open up a line and snap. Or actually, no. Let's use straighten shell or straighten UVs. We'll try straighten shell first. Actually, straighten UVs. There we go. I saw that pop and straighten. It's straighten UVs, not straighten shell. And that fit it so that it's straight according to the UV layout. That's going to be much easier to line up your image to. And then you might want to select everything again. You could drag a box around it to all to select it. And then try another layout. And it should straighten them up a little bit. And, you know, I had a texture map that I used. It had the side across the top, so I would put this up here, and I'd want the and you can, as you're selecting things on this, you can see what is, if you activate UV Shell and you hover over them, you'll see whether they're the top or the bottom. So this is the bottom piece, and I would want to move that down here. And then the top piece, which is right here, I want to move into this area. And then this piece for the edge, I would actually want it to be sort of, I'd want to scale it up and make it outside of the other part. I might even need to rotate it a little bit because it's a little bit offset from that. And I'd want to fit my texture map that way. I don't actually have a texture map. I could use the same texture map that I have on the other one. I'm going to switch back to object mode and then right click it, assign a new material, and we'll choose a blend. And with it selected, you see I've got a lot of nodes from when I was carving out stuff. It creates different polysurface shape nodes and tweaks and stuff. You might want to go ahead and hit your, in object mode, hit your delete history button again. And make sure you're in object mode. There we go. And that got rid of a lot of those nodes. And now I can easily get to my blend. And I'm just going to select the same texture map that I already have in my project here. So for the color, I would want to file. And then for the file, I'm going to choose the barrel. And I want the I want the one that is going to be not the bump or the normal, but the color one. So that's the color one. And once you choose that and bring it in, and we could also go in and put, since I do have a normal map already made, you of course may not have that. You might want, you make a bump map inside of Photoshop and then bake a normal map. But I could go to the bump map here. We'll go ahead and put the bump map on it. Going to File and choosing that bump map, and then we'd bake a normal map from it in the way that I did in the previous videos. So just check those videos out. And you should be able to see a little bit of bumpiness on there. And we can see that the texture map's not quite right. So we need to go back in. It's close actually, but we would want to go back in and adjust that UV map. So here we can see that it's actually close to the right place. We can go back to the UV shell here, choose this one, and we would want to maybe scale it a little bit and move it to fit as much of that side around it as possible. And then we want to go down here and select these ones and sort of center them in this area. And then I would want to go to the one which is for the edge and try to scale it up to fit around that edge as much as possible. You might want to zoom in or rotate so you can check that as soon as you're finished adjusting it. And I try to get the bottom part here around the section that is going to be where that opening is. And then we can switch back to object mode and deselect and see what that looks like. It's getting better. It's a little off. I might need to go in and move those around a little bit more. But that's how you're going to do it. You're going to move the points around, trying to make them fit as good as possible. You can see that I fitted around the other barrel. Let's see if we can center around that. Let me just hit F. And you can see that I placed that a little more carefully on the barrel that I am actually using. And then you're going to go through the process I've showed in the other videos to bring it over to Unity. So those are the different pieces that we have in here. The barrel is the one that I just showed that is towards the bottom here. And this object has an animation on it, and I did it inside of Unity. I didn't do it in Maya because I constructed this whole thing inside of Unity, parenting it under all the different parts, and then putting the animation at the very top here. So this new mini game target has animation on it called target float, and I keyframed it just like I did and created a loop. And I did make this into a prefab so I could make 3 of these, and I'm controlling the animation with a script that is controlling where this animation starts. So this animation is done in the same way that I did the platform. It is using Legacy, and it's using an animation component. It's plugged in, and it's playing automatically because they need to be floating from the start of the game. I don't start them to float or anything, but there is a script on this called Target Float Control, and what that's doing is it's making them look slightly different because they're using the same animation, And if you just play them exactly the same, they're going to be moving in unison, and it won't look normal. It won't look like they're actually floating on the water. So I created this script that brings in or creates a variable for the animation. So you're going to get the animation, put it in here. And it's also got a public variable, a float variable for the start time. And inside of the start section, which is going to run when you first start the game, it goes and finds the animation component on the transforms and puts it in the raft float anim variable. And then it's using the animation class dot syntax to set the start time to whatever start time you set at the very top here in the inspector. So it's a public variable. It's also enabling the animation and setting it to a weight of 1, which plays it forward, just like we did for the platform. So when you put this on a object that ends up being a prefab that you pull into your scene, you have several of these, then if I look at those, each one has that set to a different time for the animation. So if I go find the target objects right here, you'll see that this particular one has a start time set to 0.7. The start time actually goes between 0 and 1. 0 is the sort of standard beginning of the animation. 1 will be the end of the animation, and this one's set to about 3/4 of the way through the animation to start at. So they all end up starting at different times, and they loop so that they all look like they're moving a little differently in the water. And we'll take a look at another one here. It's starting at 0.3. So that's kind of it. Important to make it the target moving and looking good and like it's moving in the water. And then to actually hit the target, that's the other script that we have to look at. And that's got the script on the bulb. So if I go to the bulb nose of the prefab here, that's where the axe target hit script is. And this bulb has a capsule collider on it set to trigger. So your axe will actually go right through it if you're throwing an axe at it. And if it goes through that trigger and hits it, it will delete or destroy the axe that hit it and reveal the one that's stuck in the board here. And that's all being done through the script. I do have a rigid body on this, but it's set to is kinematic because the whole thing is sort of moving and animating with the base of this. And I want to keep track of where that object is with the physics engine so that those collisions that are going to happen with the axes are always going to happen well. And I mean, it's going to find them. And I actually changed the collision detection on here to continuous speculative because I was having some trouble with the axes hitting because everything's moving. I'm moving, the axes are moving very fast, and then the target's moving. So some of the axes weren't really hitting their target very well. So I put this, which is a made for looking for fast moving collisions. Otherwise it might not get it. And then you can see that I've got several inputs to this axe target hit script. We've got axe struck. We have a light, which actually should be plugged in. I'm not sure why that's not plugged in here. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in right now because we do want the light to go out. So the target light should be plugged in. And then when we go back to it, and look at the script, we'll see that those different objects are coming in as a public variables. So the axe that's stuck in is something we're putting in so that we can reveal it. The light that I just plugged in is there as well as a light variable. And I have an explosion prefab that we used with the tank game tutorial early in the semester. I'm plugging that in so that when you hit the bulb, it's going to explode, and you're also going to hear sort of a sound of glass breaking. I do have a Boolean target hit. That's important to register that the target has been hit. And that way you can't hit it more than once. If you're throwing a bunch of axes, you don't want to hit it more than once. So in start, the default of the target being hit is false. And also the axe, which is stuck in, I'm not actually revealing, I am revealing it, but I'm doing it through something different than enable. I'm actually using a set active to false as default. And what that does is when you're inside the inspector and you have something like this axe here, if you click on the checkbox next to the name, you actually turn it off entirely inside of the game. And that's what I'm doing with this line. Because if I just hide the mesh renderer or something like that, just hide it through a .enable flag, it'll still be there. And the axes I'm throwing might accidentally hit it and knock them away and keep me from being able to hit the bulb. So I'm actually removing it entirely so that nothing will hit it by turning this off. And that's done through a line that looks like this. You have to bring it in, and then I'm doing a .syntax .setActive set to false, and that turns that checkbox off when the game starts, and it won't get hit. And then in my on-trigger enter for the bulb, I'm doing an if statement that's checking to see if what hit the bulb is tagged axe. And so I'm being careful to tag my prefab in my axes, so each axe that gets instantiated and thrown is tagged axe. And I'm also looking for the target hit to equal to false, which means that it hasn't been hit yet. I'm going to target hit if this is true, if both of these things are true, because I'm using the double and, they both have to be true. If it's tagged axe and the bulb hasn't been hit yet, then it's going to say that the bulb has been hit, target hit true. And then it's going to reveal the stuck axe by setting its active to true. That turns on that little checkbox. It's instantiating an explosion right where it is. And it's getting the component of the audio source on this object, on this bulb, and playing it, which is the glass breaking. And then it's incrementing the axwin.axtargets global variable, which is my score, which is in a separate axwin script. And then it's destroying the bulb with a 2-second delay. It's destroying the light with a 2-second delay. The light is actually child to the bulb, so it should get destroyed automatically, and it has been. So it does turn off, but sometimes it hasn't been turning off immediately, and I think that's because I hadn't had it plugged in. And then it's running a debug line that the X target has been destroyed. It's also doing a get component parent on the transforms of the collision object. So that's looking for the top level of the axe. And when it finds that, it's destroying that axe. So, so the axe is getting destroyed, and it's looking here in the next line. This is where it's destroying. If the axe collide, which is the thing that collided with my bulb, is not equal to null, meaning it hasn't already destroyed itself through its own internal destroy command, then destroy it immediately. And that should make it disappear when this other one appears. So those lines are running, and it's making it look like I hit the target. And then the last thing is an AxeWin script, which is looking to see if I win the game. And if I do, it's going to run an animation to bring the power object down to where I can get it. It runs an animation on it. So this is actually inside of here on a higher level up inside of the hierarchy. So it's not on each prefab, it's actually on the parent of all of the prefabs. So if I go find where the targets are, here's one of the target parents, here's the parent of all of the targets, and it's just an empty that I've added the AxeWin script on, and also an audio source because I want to play a wind sound. And you can see I'm plugging in some things. I put an explosion up where the object is that has the power-up object is, so that it would call your attention to it. I'm playing a sound. I am putting in the power-up object that I want to animate down to where I can pick it up. And I'm also putting the platform in there because I want to be able to stop the platform from continuing to play sounds and all the things that it does. So if we go look at that script, there is public static int axe targets, which is the most important one that I'm using from the other script, or referencing from the other script, to keep track of how many targets I hit. I'm looking to hit 3. And then I've got another one that is for winning the game, and that by default is false. I've got something for the explosion, something for the sound, for the power-up object, and also for the platform. And then I'm bringing all of those things in to control all the different things on them. So if my axe targets score gets greater than or equal to 3 and the game has not already been won, so one axe game is false, then set one axe game to true. That way we won't be able to play the game again in this particular round. Axe targets will be reset to 0 for future games, because it is a global variable. If you die and the game resets, you need to reset all your global variables because they stay in memory. And then the audio source plays a wind sound. We instantiate a explosion up where the power-up object is, and we get the component for the power-up object and play the animation on it. And in this case, I'm just running a very basic play animation, just like we've used before with legacy animation. I'm stopping the audio on the platform, and I'm running a debug line that the axe game has been won. So if we go try that, That's the last script on this. Let's go look at that again. I'm going to run down and get on the platform. I should see the light come on. I'm going to throw my axes, and I'm trying to miss everything. I hear the sound playing as the platform's moving, and we'll try to hit that one. Okay, we've hit all three, and the lights did go out, but you saw there was a delay, so some of them may not be plugged in like the other one I changed wasn't. And then when we jump off the platform, it turns off. So we were able to get our power up, and that will allow us to get into the door. So that's the end of the mini game. Those are all the different parts of it and how it's set up. You can create your own type of mini game, but this will hopefully help you to come up with different things that you want. Maybe you want to do something where it's being thrown, or you know, controlling some kind of a target, or things to play and stop. All of that is in here, so hopefully this will help you to do that. And in the next video, I will go over the win sequence, which you get to when you get inside of the door and you pick up the torch.